In the last lecture, we looked at how the change in exchange rate can lead to losses for both the importer and the exporter, even if they demand currencies, even if they have some control over which currency they demand payment from. So, what would be the way to reduce the risk from exchange rate? One of the ways in which we hedge, and hedging is another way of saying we are trying to mitigate the risk from a certain source. So in this case, we are trying to hedge against foreign exchange rate risk. So we are hedging, in this case, with a type of a contract that is called the forward contract. So what is the forward contract? The forward contract stands in contrast to what is called the spot contract. So there are two types of exchange rates in the currency market: spot rate and the forward rate. Spot rate is the quote to exchange one currency for another on the spot, meaning today. So if I go to the market today, and this is, you most readily interact with the spot exchange rate market when you go to a foreign currency. You get off the airplane, you go to a foreign exchange counter, you give up some dollars, and you buy some foreign currency. That transaction takes place in the spot market. But if the transaction is structured in a manner where you agree to a rate of exchange today, but the currency, the actual currency, is not exchanged until a future date T, then you are dealing with the forward market, or you have been quoted the forward rate. This rate that you have been quoted today for exchange of currency that is to take place at time T would be considered the forward rate. So it is the rate that is quoted today for a currency, the exchange rate is quoted today for a currency that will be exchanged at a future date. And this quotation is given in a contractual form, meaning both the buyer and seller of the currency are obligated to perform the terms of that contract, which include the rate and the time and the amount of currency that would be exchanged at a future date as part of a legally enforceable contract. So here is an example. Assume that in January 2009, banks were offering 1-year currency forward contracts. So on a timeline 0, 1. At time 0, a 1-year forward currency contract was $1.29 per euro. And they placed an order with Manzini placed an order with a price of 500,000 euro. So what Manzini would do, that once they placed the order that had a price tag of 500,000 euro, they would simultaneously, this is the key, they would simultaneously enter into a forward contract to purchase euros in exchange for dollars at this rate. So what would be the payment required a year from now in 2010? So the exchange rate, hold on, let's see, yeah. So the exchange would be here. This would be 500,000 euros. So at time 0, you enter into a forward contract for a price of 129 per euro. Then at a year from now, you exchange euros for dollar. In other words, you will sell dollars, Manzini will sell dollars a year from now, they will sell dollars at the forward rate 1. And in exchange, they will buy euros. And that exchange would be, they will be selling at the price of 129 per euro. So multiply that by the 500,000 euros that they're buying. Essentially, they will have to pay Manzini will have to pay $645,000 to receive 500,000 euros. Notice the distinction between this transaction and the transaction that we learned in the first lecture. In the first lecture, the exchange rate was the spot rate. The spot rate, if I remember, was 145, right? The spot rate was 145. That's the spot exchange. That's the exchange today. If they were to transact that today, this is an exchange in the future. And that's the difference between the spot rate and the future and the forward rate. So the forward contract is a good deal. Why is it a good deal? Without this hedge, what would be the total payment? It would be 725,000, which is the 500,000 multiplied by 145. With the hedge, they are paying 645,000. So this is with no hedge. With hedge, is 645,000. 645,000. So essentially they are saving about what? 55 and 25, so that's about $70,000 because of the hedge. Now you can argue that a year from now the exchange rate would not be 145. The exchange rate, instead of being 145, would be, let's say, 120. In this case, the hedging would actually cost them more than it would benefit them, right? Because that would be 500,000 multiplied by 120, which I think would, I'm assuming that will be about 600,000. So they will end up paying more than they would with the hedge. They're paying 645,000. Without the hedge, they would have paid 600,000 had the exchange rate fallen to 120. But here is the key thing. Standing here today at time 0, you do not know what the spot currency would be a year from now. The spot currency in this case was 145. It could very easily be 120. But standing here, you do not know what this is going to be. So to remove this uncertainty, you are essentially locking in a value of 129. And that's the benefit of a forward hedge, that you are guaranteeing yourself that a year from now, January 2010, a year from now, regardless of what the currency does in the open spot market, your payment is guaranteed at 645,000. Thus, you have removed uncertainty. Or, stated another way, you have hedged against the uncertainty in the foreign exchange market. Similarly, you can work on another problem that is of similar type. How to hedge with forward contracts. Okay. So initially, what is happening? As you enter into this forward contract, what happens? At time 0, you go to the bank and you enter into a forward contract that says a year from now, I will buy 500,000 euros at 129 per euro a year from now. So the forward contract is, today you agree to buy 500,000 euros at $129 per euro 1 year from now. That's the transaction that is entered into at time zero today. So the bank is essentially selling you euros at 129. But how does the bank guarantee that 129? Essentially what has happened is that you have transferred your risk from yourself, or in this case Manzini has transferred its risk from himself to the bank. Because now the bank is guaranteeing 129 as the currency rate at which they will exchange euros for dollar a year from now. So now the risk, the uncertainty of the future value of euro has passed on from you to the bank. Which then brings us to the next question. Why is the bank willing to bear this risk? Because while the bank entered with Manzini a contract to sell 500,000 euros, it may have simultaneously entered into another forward contract to buy 500,000 euros from another client. So what the bank is hoping to do, that buying $500,000 from 500,000 euros from one client in the forward market and selling 500,000 euros to another client in the same forward market for the same time period, they will make a small profit in brokering this transaction. Maybe the bank will buy the euros at, let's say, $127 per euro and sell them at $129 per euro. And they will capture the 2 cents per euro profit as their risk-taking in the transaction. That's what financial institutions do. They brokerage deals between parties, and they agree to bear the risk on both sides of the transaction, and in that sense, they're expecting a reward from that transaction. So here is an example. So this is what the bank is doing. Focus on the bank. Here is the US importer. It is importing goods from an Italian company, and in exchange they are guaranteeing a $500,000 euro payment a year from now. So what does it do? The US importer goes to the bank and agrees to buy the 500,000 euro 1 year from now, and they will then use that money to pay the Italian company. In exchange, the US importer will pay, because they're being transacted at 129 per euro, they will pay $645,000 plus a fee. Simultaneously, a US exporter may be coming to the bank and saying, well, a year from now, I'm expecting a 500,000 euro payment from a German company. So a year from now, I will sell you $500,000 euros. I will sell you 500,000 euros a year from now, and they will be quoted a rate. Let's say they're quoted the same, for argument's sake, although that's not literally the case. Typically, they will have a different rate, but let's, for argument's sake, assume they're being quoted the same forward rate, a 1 year forward rate. So the exchange, that means the bank will pay them $645,000 a year from now. Pay the US exporter $645,000. In exchange, the bank will receive 500,000 euro plus a fee. So the bank will receive 500,000 euro, pass it on to you, and you will then pass it on to the Italian company. The bank will receive $645,000 plus a fee. Bank will then pass that $645,000 to the US exporter. But notice what is happening. What is the key aspect of this? The fees. It is collecting fees on both ends of the transaction when it is buying euros as well as selling euros. And these two fees account for the bank's compensation and the bank's motivation to brokerage this deal. Okay. Now let's look at how exchange this forward rate, this 129, how did this rate get established? To understand that, we have to look at the alternatives between the forward transaction and what is called a cash and carry transaction. And we will establish that the forward transaction and the cash and carry transaction are equivalent transactions. Okay? Because the cash and carry transaction can be done in such a manner to eliminate any future fluctuation in exchange risk. And if both the cash and carry transaction and the forward transaction both lead us to the same point in the future, then we can view them as equivalents, and using the equivalence approach, we can price the forward currency. So let's take a quick look at this. In a cash and carry transaction, let me explain this using this picture over here. So this is today, time 0, and this is a year from now, time 1. And our goal is to exchange dollars for euro at time 1. At time 1 in the future, a year from now, I have to exchange dollars for euro. What are the ways in which I can exchange dollars for euro? Choice number one is to play in the forward market. In the forward market, I am quoted a rate. All I'm doing is I'm being quoted a rate, 129 per euro. I have committed to buying euros, 500,000 euros, when? A year from now. So the amount of the transaction, the date of the transaction, and the value of the transaction are all set today. That's the key. All set today in the forward market. I do this one transaction, I'm done. A year from now, I go to the market, I deliver them $645,000, I receive the 500,000 euros. Alternatively, what could I have done? Alternatively, I could have borrowed dollars. I could have borrowed some dollars today, which means a year from now, I have to pay back the dollar plus the interest on the dollar. So essentially, I'm saying present value of whatever dollars I need in the future. So that's the present value of whatever dollars I need in the future at the interest rate quoted for the US currency. Then what do? I take those dollars and I use the spot market today, to convert those dollars into euro. So over here, in step 2, I'm converting dollars into euro. I deposit those euro in the bank. So a year from now, I receive future values in euro based on the present value of euro that I have deposited multiplied by 1 plus the interest rate in euro. So over here, I'm multiplying by the interest rate. In step 1, I had divided by the interest rate. So now I'm ending up with euros. Just as I did over here, I ended up by paying dollars, I ended up with euros. So in the forward market, this is one strategy I used. And then over here, this whole thing, this 3-step process, is a second strategy I'm using. And we call that strategy that we are using in the cash and carry market. So if these two things both end up giving me euros in the future, then what can I say? that I took, I had over here, what am I doing? I'm dividing the future value that I need with the interest rate, which is this part over here, 1 plus the interest rate in dollar. Then over here, I'm multiplying it by 1 plus the interest rate in euro. And of course, I'm multiplying that by the spot rate. So given this, then the forward rate and this part are equivalent. If they're equivalent, then I have an equation, and that equation we call covered interest parity or CIP. This tells me that if I know the euro interest rate today and the dollar interest rate today and the spot rate today, I should be able to determine what the forward rate is a year from now. Okay. So the forward rate at time period t is the spot rate today divided by the exchange rate, divided by the interest rates in the respective currencies. Over here, the currencies are being quoted as dollars per euro. So let's take an example. The spot exchange rate is yen per dollar. So this is our spot rate. Spot rate is always S0. It's yen per dollar. The 1 year interest rate in the US, so this is our RUS, or call that the R dollar. This is the interest rate in Japan, the interest rate in yen. So based on this, what is the forward exchange rate that would have no arbitrage? And so the forward rate in yen per dollar is the spot rate in yen per dollar. So since this is yen over dollar, the interest rates are yen over dollar. So the spot rate is 116. Interest rate in Japan was 0.10%. So that will be 1 plus 0.0010. Interest rate in US was 4.85%. So it will be 1.0485. That gives us a forward rate of 110. So the value of the dollar in terms of yen in the forward market, a 1 year forward, this is a 1 year forward quote, is less than the value of the dollar in the spot market. So in the spot market, it was 116. In the forward market, this is yen per dollar. Yen per dollar is 110. So the value of dollar has gone down. Each dollar is buying fewer yens in the forward market than it is buying in the spot market. So the value of dollar has gone down, or the value of the yen has gone up. And the reason is because of the differential interest rates. Since the interest rate in Japan is lower than the interest rate in the US, value of the dollar has gone down relative to the value of the yen. Similarly, you can work on other problems that are very similar to these numbers and calculate exchange rate, forward rates and spot rates. Okay. So compared to the cash and carry model, where we are borrowing the currency, exchanging the currency, and then investing in the foreign currency. So we are borrowing in dollars, converting the dollars to foreign currency. That's what we're doing over here. Look at the 3-step process. So three-step process. Step one, we are borrowing in dollar, exchanging the currency, and then depositing in euro. Exchanging the currency for euros and then depositing in euro. That's the cash and carry market. And the forward market is just one transaction. So since there is equivalence between these two, which market seems to be the more reasonable to use if I'm looking to exchange dollars for euro a year from now? And the market that seems the most reasonable to use would be the currency, would be the forward market. Why? Because the forward contracts are simpler. Instead of having three transactions in the cash and carry market, I'm only entering into one transaction, just one transaction, instead of the three. And you don't have to borrow in other currencies. You are borrowing in dollars, converting the dollars into euro, and depositing those euros. So now you are dealing with interest rates in two different currencies, in dollars and in euro. And borrowing may or may not be feasible depending upon your credit ratings. And secondly, your deposits may or may not be effective depending upon which country you have to deposit. Some countries have restrictions on foreign deposits and things like that. So to mitigate all of the problems that can come from the cash and carry transaction, the forward contract offers a more efficient alternative. In addition to forward contracts, we can hedge risks using what are called currency options. We will not cover this in this course, so I'll tell you in terms of the section that I'm not covering in the textbook. It starts on page 710 and ends on page 711. So I'm not covering currency options, but I wanted to lay out for you that using currency options is another viable alternative to hedge against foreign exchange risk. So that completes the section on foreign exchange risk, and we will wrap up chapter 23 with a few words on some of the other aspects of international finance.